Good morning and welcome to the 13th meeting of the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee for 2025. First item on the agenda is the business to decide whether to take items 4 and 5 in private. Item 4 is consideration of the evidence from Scottish Water, and item 5 is consideration of the committee's work programme. Are we agreed? We are agreed. So our second item of business this morning is an evidence session with Scottish Water. We'll be considering Scottish Water's latest annual report and accounts. But this is also an opportunity for a much wider-ranging discussion about Scottish Water's main challenges and priorities. And I'd like to welcome to the meeting Deirdre Meekie, the Chair, Alex Plant, the Chief Executive, Peter Farrow, the Chief Operating Officer, and Professor Simon Parsons, the Director of Environment Planning and Assurance. Now, before we move into questions, I think, Deirdre, you want to make an opening statement.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for the opportunity to come today to discuss Scottish Water. I will keep my opening remarks brief. I know that's something you're keen on, Convener, but there are a couple of areas that I think are worth highlighting, and obviously I look forward to our conversation and the questions that I know you will have for us. So the first area is that of the performance of the business, which is strong. As we all know, Scottish Water plays an essential role in everyone's daily life, but it's also a highly complex major business with revenues of approximately £2 billion, with more than 4,600 direct employees across the country and a supply chain that supports thousands more jobs across Scotland. We're also making good progress delivering on our strategic ambitions, and this includes drinking water, which sits at 99.92%. It's truly world-class, and 87% of our water bodies are rated good or excellent for water quality by SEPA, so among the best in Europe. The Customer Satisfaction Index has also rated Scottish Water as the most trusted utility in the UK, with consistently excellent customer satisfaction scores. And we've seen these trends extend in our current financial year, the details of which we'll be publishing in July. Now, our improving performance for our customers, your constituents, reinforces how disappointing Friday's industrial action was for Scottish Water, especially given the fact that our pay offer is both fair and progressive. Now, the last time we appeared before this committee, we discussed progress in delivering on our commitment to installing 1,000 combined sewer overflow monitors by the end of 2024. This was achieved, and indeed we've gone even further, and with a strong focus on the areas where the monitors can make the biggest environmental impact. And our leakage performance continues to improve, something that was also of interest to the committee previously. So those of you with a long memory may recall that our positive delivery today as one of the top performing utilities is actually a far cry from the position we were in 2002 when the business was set up. And this transformation has been possible, of course, thanks to the hard work of our teams, but also enabled via our business model of being publicly owned, independently regulated and commercially operated on a not-for-profit basis. So, as we continue to deliver our high performance today, we're also looking ahead to the next 25 years in our long-term strategy, and our consultation on that has just concluded with very positive responses. And in terms of responses, and as we look forward, we see a period which offers both challenges and opportunities. So the challenges include responding to climate change and more extreme weather, population shift and replacement of assets as they age, which means we need to continue to invest sustainably, mindful of the pressures on household finances. The opportunities include working in partnership with a variety of stakeholders to continuously improve Scotland's environment and economy. And a great example of this is what we're doing with Loch Katrine, that some members might have seen the BBC reporting on last week. So in conclusion, committee, we are ambitious for our future, and therefore the next regulatory statement, which starts in 2027, will be crucial to balancing affordability for our customers with the appropriate investment needed to ensure Scotland's world-class water remains the source of national pride that it is today. So thank you, Convener, and look forward to the committee's questions.
Thank you. Douglas, I think you wanted to say something before we go into the questions.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Yeah, it was just for transparency. Before I was an MSP, I served on the board of Opportunity North East, along with Deirdre Meekie.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to start off with the easy questions at the beginning before we go to the difficult ones. So you've got a captive audience, unless you're on a private water supply. The customers in Scotland are Scottish Water, and that's the only place they can go. How are you going to keep them happy and make sure that you're delivering what they want as prices perhaps increase? Who wants to go with that?
So I might start. I might also ask Peter to pick up as well. You're right, of course, it's a natural monopoly situation. People can't shop around for where they get their water. But as ever, we try to ensure that we're working more closely with our customers to recognise the challenges that they have. The household finances are stretched, as you kind of referred to in your opening comment, Convener. And I think the way we're looking at our customer service is that we continue to deliver customer service excellence. Some of the stats that Deirdre gave you show how well regarded we are compared to other utilities in the UK. But even in our own internal checking of how we're doing on household customer experience, we're seeing a consistently strong and improving story there. So being able to take the temperature of how customers feel about us is really important. But I do want us to do more and have more of an engagement with our customers over time, and that's some of what we've been working on. And Peter, you may just want to briefly pick up on that point.
Yeah, so we have an extensive customer engagement programme which is part of our SR27 planning. That's the next regulatory period planning cycle. And through that research programme, we have various different approaches to ask customers how happy they are with the service today and what the sort of things that they would want to be built into the future. So very extensive engagement programme. But also the other thing that we use to make sure that we're keeping customers happy is that every customer who contacts us for any piece of work to be carried out, whether that's a burst pipe, a blocked sewer, a pressure problem, we survey that customer by the means in which they contact us. So it's multi-channel, can be social media, it can be by letter, it can be by telephone call. And our current levels of customer satisfaction are 94.2%.
Okay, keeping a vast majority happy, some that you're not. How are you addressing those that are unhappy?
So Peter, do you want to pick up on how we deal with those?
Yeah, so clearly we have rigorous processes in place to deal with people who are unhappy. So the survey process that I talked about, for every customer and customers score between a 1 and a 7, and any customer who scores us at the lowest level, we phone that customer back. We ask them what has gone wrong in their view, and we put in place fixes. So we're continuously learning from any customer issues that happen, and we build in improvements after that.
Okay.
One of the things that we track on this is when we see a formal complaint, and this is reported on page 20 of the annual report and accounts. That's clear when things haven't gone as well as we would like. What's encouraging when you look at the trend over the years is that those number of formal complaints has dropped very significantly, such that in the year which we're reporting, we had one of the lowest ever numbers of formal complaints, and that's continued to be the case as we've gone into the year that we're now about to report on in July.
I think the acceptance that everything's never always going to be perfect, and holding up your hand and going back to the customer actually to try and resolve the problem after it's occurred is perhaps a solution. But turning now to the Water Industry Commission for Scotland, not an organisation without its problems, I would say, in the past. They've said that there is a deficit of £500 million available for investment due to Scottish Water's below-inflation charging decisions. So we've lost out on that investment. How are you going to make up that shortfall, and are customers going to expect to see their bills rise consistently to replace the shortfall that has occurred in the past?
So do you want to pick this up?
So let me take that, because charges are set by the board. In terms of the charges that we're currently facing today, the board was very mindful of the multiple pressures on customers. Our context is that we're always trying to ensure that we have prudent and sustained investment so that we can also balance that in terms of the pressures that are on our customers, but recognising that we have to keep prudent and sustained investment so that we don't, as we go forward, we aren't kicking the can down the road for generations to come, and that we're then not just finding ourselves facing even more issues and increasing costs. So that's the balance we're trying to achieve in terms of the balance that we're trying to get. Maybe a pass to you, Alex, in terms of when we've had to take a call and actually pare back on that, we have had to live with those consequences.
Yes, whenever you're making that judgment, if you're not investing as much as you would ideally like, there is then a consequence in terms of some of the service standards that we would like to have delivered during this period. And so, as a result of there being a 500 million smaller investment programme than planned, we have been able to do less than we wanted to in areas like reducing the risk of flooding for properties who are on the flood register. That sort of choice is the one you're forced to make, and you'll always be forced to make, because the envelope of expenditure is never as big as you'd want it to be. I think what we've sought to do in that balance that Deirdre described, and this is not just a Scottish Water judgment, this is the system in Scotland, I think has been pretty sensible, because it's tried to have a prudent, stable investment programme, recognising the pressures of particularly climate change and the need to adapt to a more severe climate. That means there's been a steady, prudent investment over time. And yes, there are still pressures on household finances, and we're always cognizant of that. But I'd rather have that steady increment than more of a roller coaster, which we've seen elsewhere.
So if the Commission is the one that agrees the price rises and they've identified the shortfall, surely they'll be pushing you to put prices up to make good that shortfall. And is it something that householders need to worry about?
So the Water Industry Commission for Scotland sets the overall price cap for the 6-year period. It is then the board's decision as to what the annual charges are. So when we go through that process that Deirdre described, the role of the Water Industry Commission for Scotland is to check that the charges that the board proposes in line with the regulatory settlement. So we don't have pressure from the Water Industry Commission for Scotland in any given year.
But they will they could set a higher cap, recognising the fact that you've underinvested, as it were, because of the decision. Therefore, the temptation would be for you to increase if there's a sudden shortfall identified or there's major investment suddenly required in a year.
So I don't want to preempt the quite properly considered assessment that the Water Industry Commission for Scotland will make for the next 6-year period, because we're working hard on our business plan for that period, which will put forward what we think the right level of investment is. Again, always with the board trying to help us strike that balance about customer bills and investment, and also critically, we're always trying to balance the interests of future generations as well as current. That's the process we'll go through. I think it is fair to say that when we look at the long-term strategy that Deirdre mentioned at the beginning, we are seeing that those pressures around population growth and change, the need to adapt to a more severe climate, and indeed the kind of need to replace our assets, many of which are coming towards the end of our lives, mean there is an upward pressure on the investment we have. So that is what we set out the long-term strategy. What we also, though, look at there is to say, we think it is our duty to leave no stone unturned in trying to reduce the pressures, so that we look at how can we help reduce demand on our systems, how do we work with customers and with other stakeholders to reduce demand, how do we do everything we can to transform, to innovate and be more efficient and collaborate. And if we can then make some of those changes, that will reduce the pressure that ultimately comes from customer bills, because that is the source of our income.
And then just to build on that, Convener, just in relation to, again, when we're thinking about the bills and the balance, just to reinforce that over 52% of households in Scotland do receive financial support with their charges. So again, that helps in terms of the pressures that are on our customers.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this in the nicest possible way, is a little sort of flag to people, householders in Scotland, that prices are going to go up and probably go up considerably. I think that's what you're saying, isn't it?
So the general direction of travel, which is what we flag in the long-term strategy and in our climate change adaptation report that Simon and his team worked on and we published last year, shows that there is going to be ongoing pressures. So yes, to that extent we are flagging that. We're also setting out the ways in which we can mitigate that increase.
Okay. The Deputy Convener's got some questions. Michael.
Thank you. Good morning. A couple of points just to follow up on this. I'd be interested in getting a better understanding of what percentage of your annual expenditure is dependent upon what you raise through the charges that you apply.
Yeah. So we, at the moment, that is around about 90% of the funding we receive is from charges, and about 10% is from the debt we have under the auspices of Scottish Government debt. So it's about 90-10 at the moment.
Okay. So about 90% of your annual expenditure, revenue and capital is dependent upon what you raise through charges.
That's correct. Yeah.
If we were to go for, say, for example, a year or two with below inflation increases in water charges, what would the potential impact of that then be on your future spending commitments in investing in infrastructure?
So I think, in a sense, the question you asked, Deputy Convener, mirrors some of what happened at the beginning of this regulatory period, where the board's decision was to hold increases back. And so we had at least 1 or 2 years of below inflation increases. That created the 500 million reduction in the investment that we expected to have at the beginning of that period, with some of the consequences I've talked about. I don't know, Simon, whether you want to pick up on that, because it's and I suppose, therefore, if it were to happen again, you'd sort of replicate the kind of issue we had at the beginning of this period. Simon.
Yeah, so right at the beginning of our regulatory period, which started in 2021, I think we recognised there was considerable pressure on the back of COVID, but also in terms of, obviously, other pressures on the cost of living. So we made a decision at that time, which was before Alex joined, to basically keep charges at or below CPI at the time, or below that level. So that meant that we had a choice to make, and that choice was to reduce the overall size of our capital programme. And our capital programmes, in terms of at the time, was £4.5 billion or so. So that choice for us at the time meant that we needed to, in essence, phase projects, phase investment into later years in this regulatory period, but also into the future in terms of our next regulatory period. And specifics there for us were reducing the investment we made in flooding, in supporting connections from new housing, net zero, and also some maintenance activities. So fairly significant impact from us, even just small changes, 1 or 2% changes in the revenue we generate compared to CPI.
Okay. I think if I recall correctly, there have been calls in recent years for no increases in water rates. What would the potential consequences of that be if it was to be implemented?
Yes, in a sense, it follows on from some of what Simon was saying. If we were in a world in the future where we had no increases in rates, given those background pressures that were talked about earlier, we would basically see service begin to fall. So the consequences are, would you see service standards fall below the levels we're at today, which is the converse of what we're trying to do, which is to carry on improving the levels of service that everybody receives. The other consequence would be, if you're deferring the investment that is essential, you will eventually, it will catch up with you, and there will be a consequence for a future generation who could then find themselves facing real cliff edge increases in bills to try to recover the lost ground.
Yeah, so the increases in future years could be even greater than would be anticipated if you were to defer investment decisions.
Essentially, Deputy Convener, yes, a deferral has a consequence later, and therefore that would be the case. And as I talked about, I think Scotland has sought to try and strike this balance of steady investment to try and avoid those cliff edges. If you look elsewhere, you will see the consequence of that deferral and real cliff edge increases happening.
That's very helpful. My final question is to Deirdre, and that is in relation to the board's cycle of decision-making around any increase over the course of the financial year. At what point in that financial year are you having to make the decision on what the increase will be for the following year?
So we're starting to look at it towards the end of the calendar year in anticipation for the end of the financial year.
Okay, so you as a board would be looking to make a decision when?
About the end of December, board.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Next questions come from Monica.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, everyone. I will refer to my register of interest as I am a member of Unite and GMB, and I also chair the Scottish Labour Trade Union Group here in Parliament. I heard from the opening remarks that we have a strong Scottish water today, and in large part that is thanks to the hard work of your staff. Do you agree, therefore, that it's important to value the workforce and to pay them fairly?
So let me just set some context, and the answer is yes. And that is actually a very strong focus of Scottish Water and its purpose and its ethos. But I'm going to pass to Alex and then Peter in terms of their dealings in relation to the industrial relations recently.
Thank you.
So, thank you. And yes is the answer to the question. Absolutely. Our people do a great job. You know, some of the success that we talked about, most of the success we talked about, is down to the people who are out there dealing with difficult issues day in, day out, in all weathers. So our people do a great job. And I'm sure Scottish Water is a good employer who cares for its people. And we see that coming back in our employee survey results, which are encouraging. Always more to do, but they are positive results. And the pay offer we made for 24-25 is a good and fair and progressive pay offer. It is above inflation, and it's progressive in that those on the lowest salary levels will receive the biggest increase from that pay offer. We are always trying to balance the interests of trying to get the best pay deal we can with long-term sustainability of the organisation and mindful of the impact on customers, because ultimately the customer pays for all of these things. And as I said, I think it's a good and fair deal. We've improved it several times since the beginning of the negotiations, and I would like this to be resolved. I want people to have the money in their pocket that they should have from July of last year, so it's now been a long time. And our door's open. We want to get this resolved. We'll meet any time with our union colleagues. And I think it just is important we try to resolve this as quickly as possible, and that's our focus.
I'm really glad to hear that your door is open. I think that's important for a chief executive. When did you last meet with the trade unions? When did you sit down with them to talk about these issues?
So the issues around the pay deal have been led by Peter Farrer and my colleague Lynn Highway, who's our Director of People. So I haven't met with the unions around that issue because it's being led by my very able colleagues. So I'm happy to meet with the unions. In fact, I really want to meet with the unions because I want to discuss with them some of the really critical issues ahead of us, like the balance of charges in the future, the next strategic review, how we deliver on our Beyond Zero Harm ambitions. We've set up an industry collective to try and drive health and safety to the best possible levels, working not just within Scottish Water, all our partners. There are all sorts of issues that I want to get into those conversations with the unions about. We need to resolve the pay deal first.
Just so I'm clear, because I get mixed up quite easily, when did you last meet with the unions? So
I haven't met with the unions. I was due to meet with the unions a couple of months ago. I held back on that because we were still in the midst of the pay negotiations. So it's a while now since I met the unions one-to-one. Or one-to-many, because it's a joint trade union arrangement.
So not in 25, was it in 2024?
In 24, yeah.
So you sat down with the trade unions then. So your door is open, which is good. You've not managed to meet with the unions, even though the workers walked out last week. And we're hearing from the trade unions that industrial action is now likely to escalate. Are you aware that emails have been sent to Scottish Water employees that have been described as union busting or anti-union?
So we have been trying to communicate with all of our people about the facts around the pay deal. I'm aware of the communications we've set out. That's been trying to be clear and transparent about the offer we've made. One of the things that I think has been disappointing is that the offer that's before everybody has not actually been put to the union members to consider. So the ballot that was taken was around the principle of industrial action rather than the offer being put to union members for their assessment.
So are you comfortable as Chief Executive that the really important people who do the hard work in your organisation in difficult weather all year round, are you comfortable that they have the impression that you and your senior management team are anti-union and are constantly critical of the trade unions in your internal correspondence?
So that is not the way I feel about our unions. I think the unions are a really critical part of any kind of organisation. It's a way in which management and colleagues can find a way to work together on important issues. I don't recognise that description. I understand that emotions can run high when you're in a period of industrial action, but our communications have sought to be measured and factual and clear and focused on trying to find a way through, and that's where we still are.
So you are aware there's a problem because, yet again, the workers are out on strike. You haven't met personally with anyone from the unions in relation to this pay deal, and there's now reputational damage to Scottish Water because, as an employer, you're now being framed as anti-union. Now, when you've been in the committee before, I have asked you about fair work principles, and you've told this committee that you absolutely honour those principles, but you don't meet the unions. The senior management team send anti-union emails. You tell us and the unions that you're happy to meet, but you haven't managed to do it. Why is this not a priority for you as Chief Executive?
So, just to pick up on those issues, I would just refute that we send anti-union emails. That's not true. As I said before, we've sent factual information to all our colleagues, because I'm also mindful of the fact that most of our colleagues, in fact, are not unionised. So I have a duty of care to all employees, including all unionised employees, and the issues we've been trying to deal with are to ensure that information is clear and understood by everybody. We do sign up to Fair Work principles, and our position is to try to resolve the issue. Now, the choice I have made as Chief Executive is to ask my very able colleagues in the shape of Peter Farrer and Lynn Highway to lead the work around the annual pay award. And that is an appropriate process that one would expect to see in all sorts of scenarios. I am ready to meet the unions to talk about some of those longer-term issues, but it's been sensible to try to ensure that the negotiating committee, which Peter is involved in, is the body where we try to resolve these matters.
You're ready to meet them. Is that this week? Do you have availability this week?
So my point about the door being open is that we, as the negotiating forum, and the Scottish Water members of that negotiating forum, are ready to meet any time. And Peter, you might want to come in at this.
Well, if you just hold on a second, because I'm not finished. I think it's important, the Chief Executive, continue to ask, because as a member of this Parliament, as a representative of Central Scotland, I would much prefer people were at their work. I don't like it when workers have to go out and stand on picket lines, including at the Hamilton wastewater treatment works like they did last week, because of the impacts on constituents and because we do all want world-class water here in Scotland. But I have to ask, Alex Plant, have you ever been on strike? Have you ever had to withdraw your labour?
So just to come back to your point, I agree with you. It's in no one's interest for there to be ongoing industrial action. It doesn't help customers, it doesn't help our people. It is a regrettable position, which is why we stand ready to meet the unions at any point to try to resolve, because the only way you can resolve is through negotiation.
And to the question, have you ever had to withdraw your labour?
So to the question, I have not taken strike action during my career.
Okay. Would you agree that for workers to withdraw their labour, to go on strike, to forfeit a day's wage, do you accept that that takes courage?
I think it is always a difficult choice that anyone makes to withdraw their labour. I think, though, going back to what I said at the beginning, the dispute in question is about the annual pay award. Okay. An annual pay award is about whether an organisation is properly reflecting inflationary pressures in the environment. The award we have made is for a comfortably above inflation offer, and it is a progressive and good and fair one. But I accept that it's a difficult choice that people make whenever they choose to withdraw labour.
So, in your opinion, the offer, which is 3.4%, is that right? Or £1,050 for those in the lowest grades over the same period, over a 9-month period, has been described as good, fair and progressive. So let's get some context. Executive members of Scottish Water, total pay including benefits, increased from £585,000 in 2023 to £842,000 in 2024. That's 43% higher than in 2023. So can you say, just in a few words, how this can be justified, this significant increase, when the rest of the Scottish Water workforce have been offered 3.4% rise in basic pay for 2025-26?
So because that's a question about the executive pay, I'm happy to take that one.
I was still speaking to Alex Plant.
So I don't set the salary levels. That is a matter for the board.
But you have an opinion. You've just told us that this is a good deal and it's fair, and you're disappointed in the unions that you haven't bothered to meet yet.
So there are two different issues. The annual pay award is around whether we are making an appropriate annual uplift to cope with the inflationary pressures that colleagues are facing. The 3.4% award we've made is comfortably above inflation, and if you look back over longer periods of time, you'll see that the awards we've made have always been above inflation. So it is doing the job it is supposed to do of ensuring that we're not falling behind the general inflationary environment. The issues around executive pay are around, in particular, the years you're talking about when there was quite a lot of changes within the executive pay and team. And at that point, you're judging a question about whether that's being set at a level you can attract the best talent. But that is a matter for the chair, I think.
Sorry, and I'm just come in slightly here because I think Deirdre needs to answer that question, Monica, because I think it's...
That's fine. I was happy to bring Deirdre in once Alex had finished, so thank you, Convener.
Okay, so thank you. So the Scottish Water pay structure, it is designed to deliver good outcomes for the people of Scotland. It's agreed by the Scottish Water Board and the Scottish Government. They're transparently set out in our accounts, as you know. I think the point is, though, we are competing against private companies for the talent we need to lead, as I said at the beginning, a very complex business, you know, one of the biggest public corporations in Scotland that is performing well. And our benchmarking demonstrates that our executive salaries are actually among the lowest of any comparable company in the UK. So we need to attract the talent with the skills and the experience to continue to ensure that Scottish Water delivers the kind of outcomes that you expect of us on a daily basis and for the longer term.
Outcome should be a happy workforce. It doesn't have to go on strike every year. Is that a good sign that things are going well? You talked about customer surveys and internal surveys. Is that a good sign that the workforce are out on strike again, having to give up a day's wage?
So again, I think it's very disappointing, as I said. Our employee satisfaction surveys do come back very consistently high. There is a lot of very positive engagement with our staff who are aligned with the common purpose of Scottish Water to support a flourishing Scotland. There's a lot of consistency about that. But in terms of the focus on the industrial reaction at the moment, it is very disappointing. And I don't know whether maybe Peter, do you want to add?
Yeah. Sorry. I'm going to bring you in. Then there are other members that want to ask questions along these lines. And I'm very conscious, and I know Monica is conscious to get to the bottom of this, but we are not going to solve the pay dispute in the committee room. So the generalities of it we're interested in. So I'm going to go to Peter, and then Douglas, then Mark, and then Bob, and we'll see where we get to after that.
Okay, thank you. So, as Deirdre said earlier, last week's industrial action was disappointing as it benefits no one. It doesn't benefit customers, employees or Scottish Water. The pay offer for this year at 3.4% is a good and fair offer. It's comfortably above inflation, and it's a progressive offer in that, as Alex said, the people on the lowest salary grades get the highest percentage increase. Scottish Water is performing well, Monica, and you asked about do we value this. Nobody values the contribution of our people more than I do. I've been in the business for 41 years. I spend a lot of time out in the front lines, and I truly understand the contribution that our people make to delivering fantastic service to our customers every day. However, we do have to balance our customer affordability with the investment that we make in our people and our assets that Alec talked about there. And I believe that we've made a significant investment in our people over the years, and that can be demonstrated, as Alec mentioned there, by pay awards which are comfortably over inflation over the last 10 years. And if you add this year's pay offer to the huge investment that we made in our people last year when we implemented a brand new pay and grading structure, our pay bill has gone up in those 2 years alone by 17%. Now that is a significant investment in our people. And just to finish off, I'm an executive on the board of Scottish Water. I lead the the pay negotiations for Scottish Water. This is a good offer. And as Alex and Deirdre have said, our door is always open. And I would like to encourage the union leaders to put our refreshed offer in front of their members, because they haven't put that offer in front of their members yet, and get back around the table so we can have some meaningful negotiations as soon as possible.
To give everyone their head as much as possible, but you are going to carry on your negotiations outside this room, and this committee will have an interest in the generality of it, but we cannot get into calling on unions or people, or calling on you, tell you to do various things. I think that's inherently wrong of a parliamentary committee. I think we can delve into the facts. So I know passions are high, and I know you feel strongly about it. I could see it by the wagging of your pen. But
I meant to say that we have encouraged union leaders to get back. It wasn't a request from me.
Well, I'm just trying to draw some lines here, and I want to get back to some of the other members, because there are some other questions apart from this. Douglas, do you want to come in?
Staying on executive pay, convener. In terms of, I think Deirdre, you said, in terms of where you've seen executive pay within Scottish Water was actually below sort of market rate. But if I compare, for example, with ScotRail, which is another state-owned monopoly, the chief executive there has, her salary is less than half, or package is less than half than what you would be paying. So is that not a better comparison?
I think where we're looking for our talent is from other comparable companies in the private sector. I mean, but there are, as you say, across in some public companies like GB Energy, for example, we're not out of kilter with the package that's being offered there. So, but we need to be really thoughtful about where we're sourcing our talent from. But
is it not the bonus scheme that is really putting this out of kilter with so many others within public sector?
But then, well, again, it depends which one. It's sort of which one you're looking at. But a GB Energy one, again, not out of kilter in terms of the bonus offering there either. Okay.
Going on to the accounts as well, it shows that within pay and benefits, there was an accommodation allowance of 29,000 paid to Alex, and a contribution of 42,000 towards LBTT. Is that a benefit that's available for other employees?
So in terms of that is for the executive. That benefit is for the executive.
So do you think the employees, so if I was an employee with Scottish Water, I was moving between Aberdeen and Edinburgh, for example, that wouldn't be something that would be available to me?
So we do have a relocation policy, the details of which I'm going to ask Alex to comment on.
So I don't know the full details of the relocation policy as it applies to everybody. The question that you were asking was around the choices made around my relocation, where the offer I was made was around needing to come, obviously quite rightly, live and work in Scotland if I was to take up the role, and that included a relocation element in the offer that was made to me before I accepted.
Mm-hmm. So, Deirdre, in terms of for the executives, is there a policy in place for relocation that can be tied back to?
Yes, there is a policy in place for relocation.
And in terms of for LBTT, for example, when somebody's buying a private property, would you expect that Scottish Water would pay a chunk of the LBTT?
So what we have to do is recognise that we are trying to attract talent, that if we are asking somebody to come and work for Scottish Water, we do expect them to live in Scotland, and then we have to be thoughtful about the kind of package that will enable them to be able to do that.
But would you not expect a salary of 246,000, a pension of 67,000, a bonus scheme, potentially up to 85% of salary, not draw enough without having to pay relocation costs?
I think it's about we have to look at it in the round. And in the round, like I said, the package that we are able to offer, having carried out comprehensive benchmarking, actually shows that we are below many similar comparable companies that we would be looking to compare ourselves with and to draw talent from.
Okay, thanks, Convener.
I think there's evidence, Douglas, of other people getting that salary in the form of Tim Hare when he was at Ferguson Marine, was paid all his accommodation costs, Mark, and then Bob.
Yeah, the critical difference here is you're a public corporation. You're not a private utility. I mean, you might be fishing in the same pool to attract senior executives to come to Scottish Water, but you're a public corporation. So, you know, can you commit to full disclosure around salary structures, around bonuses, targets, all of that detail? Can that be made public?
Absolutely, it is, and it's all set out within our annual accounts in painstaking detail. And you know, I recognise what you're saying, that you know we are publicly owned, we are independently regulated, we are commercially run on a not-for-profit basis, and it's a very good model that works. But if we want to continue to deliver to the expectations that you rightly set for us, we need to make sure that we have the right people with the right skills and experience who have the ability to lead what is a complex £2 billion company.
Okay, so all of the details of bonus schemes, salary structures are all available. So can I ask you, do senior managers get paid a double bonus at the end of a regulatory period?
Senior managers being the executive.
Senior management, do they get paid a double bonus at the end of a regulatory period?
Yeah,
so,
Alex.
I think you might be referring to the fact that as well as the annual bonus scheme that is set out here, there's also a long-term incentive plan which also applies, again, the details of which are in our annual report and accounts. That's quite a complex thing because it has a series of periods of, because it's the long-term incentive plan is there to try to incentivise retention over a longer period of time. So there are periods where the long-term incentive plan opens, it closes after a period of time, then there's a vesting period, and then that can be paid. So is that the thing you're referring to?
Well, is that a yes?
So there are two things happening there. There's one is the annual performance bonus. And it's worth saying that all employees in Scottish Water do qualify for an annual outperformance incentive payment. So that's applicable to everybody. There's a scheme that applies to the executives, which is set out in the annual report and accounts. That's the annual one. Separately, there's a long-term incentive plan, which is common in many large organisations, and that applies. And because it's a long-term thing, it's attempting to try to retain core talent over a longer period of time rather than lose them to competitors.
So that's effectively a double bonus then at the end of the regulatory period. Is that right?
So
if I read your annual report, I can get all the details about how that applies.
They're in here. I wouldn't describe it as a double bonus. There are two different schemes.
I certainly wouldn't describe it as a double bonus. It's a recognition that we reward on an annual basis, and that we are trying to ensure that we retain our executive to make sure they deliver for the regulatory period. Okay. And again, Mark, it's all set. We benchmark everything. And when we put all this benchmarking together, we are still below comparable companies in terms of what we are paying our executive.
Okay. Alex, I think you said to the workforce recently that they should view contractors, people working for outsourced contracting organisations, as colleagues on an equal footing with your employees. Can I ask you what the percentage split is within everybody who's working for Scottish Water between those who are outsourced contractors and those that are employees of Scottish Water? So and how is that changing over time?
Yeah, so at the high level, we have about 4,600 employees, direct employees within Scottish Water, and we work with a supply chain. There's a similar number, about 4,500. But the issue about when we make that choice as to when it's better to have a full-time employee taking on work or where we need to use the skills of the supply chain is one that we look at quite regularly. Peter, you've been looking specifically at this issue. Do you want to just give a bit more detail?
Yep.
And if you could say, Peter, about whether that's a changing picture.
Yes, absolutely. So,
what does that look like now? What does that look like in the past? Okay. How's that going to change going forward?
I'll cover that. So, since Scottish Water was formed back in 2002, all of our capital investment projects have been delivered by contractors. We have never carried out that type of work ourselves. It's always been outsourced, and that hasn't changed. And it's not going to change going forward. In the general day-to-day operations of the business that I run, there's a trend which is bringing work back in-house from contractors. And that really, from restructuring the business back in 2010, I made a clear commitment to the field teams at the time that core reactive operational services would be carried out by our dedicated in-house teams, and that commitment has not changed. Okay, and as I mentioned, there is a trend of work coming back in now, and I can give you a few examples of that. So one of these is in our electrical and mechanical maintenance teams, where we've implemented new technology, new processes, which means that our internal teams are far more efficient and more productive. They've freed up capacity, so we are bringing work back in from the supply chain for our internal people to make sure that they are working as productively as possible. Second example I've got is with PFI contracts. So PFI contracts were all contracted out. We've got 9 PFI contracts. 2 have come back into Scottish Water already, and we've absorbed them back into the day-to-day operations of our business. And the other 7, when they come back, will be doing the same thing.
Okay. If you're a contractor and you're getting paid, I understand, between £550 and £650 a day, is it actually better for you to be working for a contractor rather than to be an employee at Scottish Water?
I don't know if I can answer that without knowing more detail, because that's just the price of a job, and I really don't know how that relates to...
If you have somebody who's working for Scottish Water as an employee and they're doing the same job as somebody who is working for an outsourced contractor and they're getting more money as an outsourced contractor, why wouldn't you just work for the contractor rather than Scottish Water?
Well, people want to work for Scottish Water. I think that's one of the key things here. We have a very low churn rate in Scottish Water. I mean, I've been here for 41 years. We have many people, probably over 1,500 people who have got more than 25 years service. People want to work for Scottish Water.
You see the difference here, though, when we talk about executive pay, the description is, we've got to be competitive because we're competing with the private sector, and therefore we have to increase salaries by, 40% in order to attract the best. When it comes to other grades within Scottish Water, you understand, though, that there's a private sector that can actually employ people with a better wage and a better salary. Therefore, if you want to be competitive in attracting talent to a public corporation, do you not need to be considering pay, given that actually pay in the contracted sector is probably better for people?
Well, struggling slightly with this to understand, because I assume Scottish Water have things like pensions and statutory sick pay and other benefits that they pay which contractors might not pay. So it might be helpful, just to help answer this question slightly, if somebody could talk to some of those.
So, yeah, I think it is an important point that when you look at the comparative choices that somebody might make between working for Scottish Water or working for a private contractor, it's the whole package that you are considering. So at Scottish Water, we have a very kind of generous pension scheme, which would be unlikely to be available in the kind of scenario you're talking about, Mark. You've got the fact that there is everybody in Scottish Water receives an annual outperformance payment incentive depending on performance of the company. There's very good training. We provide a really good working environment, and that's some of the reason why the retention of staff that Peter talked about is the case. It's also, again, looking at what comes back through our data from employee surveys. We have a very high intent to stay. So always trying to balance that, of course, always trying to make that work, but always trying to balance that against how much money we've got and trying to keep the interests of customers in mind as well. That's the balance we're always trying to make. At the moment, I feel we're getting it about right.
But can you say we do sometimes, from time to time, see pressures in certain disciplines whereby, you've got one sector that you're seeing an increase in activity. So then you do see pressures coming to bear. And that's something we, again, have to be really thoughtful about. But the package that Alex has just outlined is actually quite a compelling one.
Okay.
Bob, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I first of all thank Monica Lena for exploring a lot of these issues. I find it incredibly helpful, and I think it is important to look at the bonus structures. For a bit of context, Welsh Water in 2021 was paying its chief executive pay and bonuses package of £892,000, and in 2023 that was £792,000. It still doesn't sit comfortably with the convener that we talk about having to be competitive to pay the best, because when I look for 2023 as well, it's reported that in England and Wales water companies get £9.1 million, not salaries, but bonus specific. So I suppose it's a question specifically to Deirdre. I'm not comfortable at all with these level of bonuses, but is this maybe systematic of a market that's broken across the UK, that Scottish Water feels it has to be competitive? So it's like a race to the top, if you like, Deirdre, where others are paying eye-watering amounts of money and Scottish Water's following suit. Could you say something about whether or not you would like to see reform across the UK, simply so it's not possible to pay such huge bonuses in the market more generally?
So I think the market is what the market is elsewhere, and when we're benchmarking, obviously we're looking at these other companies. But I think the fact that, as I said, our benchmarking shows that we are, way under these companies, shows that we are being really thoughtful about what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. And while the package has to be appropriate, I think all the things that Alex outlines is people come to work for Scottish Water, yes, and they need to be paid competitively and fairly, but they come to Scottish Water because they are committed to what we're trying to do and achieve.
I suppose I wasn't trying to appreciate your answer, Deirdre. I wasn't trying to give you a kind of bit of wriggle room for why you've paid these bonuses. It's more about, do you believe that reform elsewhere in the UK in relation to the water market and eye-watering level of bonuses would make it better value for Scottish Water when you look to recruit and retain who you see would be the best senior executives? Because I think the unions watching will still feel deeply uncomfortable at these levels of pay awards and bonuses for senior executives. Do you think reform UK-wide, capping a lot of this, would be beneficial?
So I think the Cunliffe inquiry is actually looking at this at the moment, and I think that's something for them to review and conclude. I think the other thing, though, I would add is when we do look at the CEO salary, it's actually at 11.1. The CEO ratio is 11.1% to our other employees. That's actually a very good ratio, again, when you compare it to all other companies, not just water companies. So I think we're getting you would expect me to say this, but I think we are getting a good balance in trying to recognise the challenges that people like yourself raise, but also recognise that we have to have a company, we have to have the talent to deliver to the expectations that you also set of a complex £2 billion revenue company.
I appreciate Scottish Water trying to strike a balance in what I would see as a flawed marketplace, and Scottish Water having to respond to that. I know Ofwat have been given additional powers recently, but we'll see if they actually do what it says in the tin. I have my doubts perhaps a little bit in that. One final question, Convener. Workers and union members will be following this exchange, primarily with Monica Lennon's line of questioning. What are the bonuses for ordinary workers on the ground in Scottish Water who do an exemplary job, separate from whatever the pay increase award is? Is there a suite of packages and measures and bonuses that ordinary workers also get?
Yes. So all employees qualify for the annual outperformance incentive payment, which is paid every year, which depends upon, it's paid if we hit certain targets. So in the year in question for the annual report, the payment received by all employees was just over £1,000 for that year. We haven't quite concluded this year's performance year. Well, in fact, it did finish yesterday, but the data is still coming through. But actually, it's been a very strong performance year, so I would expect there to be a similar level of annual outperformance incentive payment available for all colleagues this year as well.
So only for clarity, rather than a follow-up question.
Yes.
Is that subject to the pay discussions that are ongoing?
It's not. The way that we calculate it depends on there being a conclusion to the pay award, but the bonus itself depends upon performance.
But that could be
complexity. The complexity is we have to know what the baseline is to calculate it.
But Peter Farrer could be getting into pay discussions saying, "Look, we'll give you more for better." That's potentially a.
That's a final question, Bob. I think that there was 3 iterations of that. Peter, do you want to answer that before I come back to Monica?
Just briefly, yes. I mean, the annual bonus payment can be part of the collective bargaining that we do and negotiate every year. It's not been part of the discussions this year. That's purely been about the annual pay offer.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Monica, back to you.
I want to come in the back of Mark Russell's question, but just to reiterate, and thank you, Peter, for the time you gave me earlier, because it is really important that Scottish Water follows Fair Work Convention principles and the Scottish Government pay strategy on how you approach negotiating under the recognition agreement that you have with the 3 unions. And I've heard a lot about open doors, and I look forward to hearing that there have been constructive talks. But in terms of the contracts that are awarded that are worth billions of pounds, obviously big projects, how do you ensure that that is conducted, that those contracts are awarded in an open and transparent manner?
Yep, so as you would expect, we go through following all expected procurement practices so that we're checking that we conduct all of those issues in the right way. We obviously comply with all relevant legislation in that regard, and we are seeking to try and find the best deal for the people of Scotland in any contract that we award. In fact, we're in a live process now, which therefore I can't go into details about, but it is exactly following those sorts of principles. And the other thing that's worth saying in that regard is that we try to look at sort of best value rather than lowest cost, because you're trying to get the right balance of the skills and expertise and ways of working, particularly actually increasingly, we're trying to develop models which recognise the long-term nature of our business, and we want partners who we work with in partnership rather than just a sort of client-contractor type arrangement, which I think has its limitations. But in any of those procurement processes, we follow all expected procurement law.
Thank you. And just a question, because bonuses have been discussed. In terms of the different bonus schemes that exist for senior management team, is there any link between bonus and any of these contracts that we're talking about being delivered under budget? Is there a link between bonus and that outcome?
Not in that way. So the way that the bonus, again, it's all set out in the annual report and accounts, but it depends on how we're performing against our 3 kind of core ambitions, which are around service excellence, so some of the issues that Peter talked about. Again, if you look at both the 23-24 and as we're finalising 24-25, actually our overall performance is the highest it's ever been in terms of service excellence. So that forms part of the bonus. Another part is the progress towards our net zero ambitions, which is work that Simon leads on behalf of us. So that forms another part of the calculation as to how much is awarded. And the final bit is there is a sort of link because there is a kind of great value and financial sustainability aspect. So ensuring that overall the company is in good financial health is there, but there's not a direct link in the way that that you might consider in relation to contract award.
Okay, and is there, or have there been any examples of contracts that have been delivered under budget and then, I don't know, money then comes back into Scottish Water? Has that happened?
I mean, there will have been occasions, I'm sure, where the contract position has been outperformed. I don't have particular details. Simon,
I would be interested, so if you're able to give us more details after today, but if Simon can help, that would be great.
So if you consider our capital programme, so we're investing about £1.1 billion this year across our capital projects. So that's thousands of projects, each individual projects, which are delivered by a range of different investment or delivery vehicles, companies or agglomerations of companies. So across those, if you take that 1.1 billion, there will be no doubt there'll be projects in there which are under budget or significantly under budget. There'll also be some projects that are over budget as part of that, as you'd expect in that kind of range. One of our measures and one of our kind of corporate measures allows us to say, are we delivering projects below or on our forecast cost? And that's 100%, so if anything over 100% means it's costing us more, anything below 100% is costing us less. We're at 99 point something, I can't remember the exact number, but we're pretty much there at the end of the year in terms of being able to, in the round across those hundreds or thousands of projects were in the round in delivering pretty much as our forecast. As part of our procurement, though, we would have baked in and we would have considered kind of efficiency opportunities in there as part of that, and they can often add up to very significant tens or hundreds of millions of pounds over a six-year period. And that obviously means that we can reduce customers' bills, we can keep costs low as part of that.
Okay. Just, Convener, I think it would be helpful, and I hope you agree, if after today we could get some written correspondence that sets out those projects in the capital programme that were either delivered under budget, on budget, over budget, and just to read across those that were open tenders, those where the contractors were invited in, and if there's been any impact on bonus for the senior team. I think just for transparency that would be really helpful, and then we could have a look at that.
We can, of course, write and set out. I mean, we have a very transparent approach to everything we do, including how we look at these issues, so we can look at that in the round. We report regularly to our economic regulator on how the capital programme is performing in the way that Simon said, so we can, of course, write to the committee on those matters. I suppose the other thing, just of course, to bear in mind is that any time we're doing better than the contract, if that creates a benefit, it just gets reinvested back in for the benefit of the people of Scotland, because, of course, we're a publicly owned entity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we're going to leave salaries, bonuses and the rest, move on to other matters, which Kevin's going to start off on. Kevin.
Thank you very much, Convener. And you've touched upon the £1.1 billion of capital spend. Mr Plant, you have said that you look at best value and not just cost. I want to explore further because money is tight, and I think that sometimes there is a wee bit of illogicality, a lack of common sense that comes in to play when we're dealing with capital projects. What I want to explore first of all is the level of cooperation, coordination with other utilities, with local authorities, so that work, Scottish Water work, can be done at the same time as other utility work, or is done before road or pavement resurfacing, which of course could indeed save you some money as well. I don't know who's the best place to answer that. Probably Mr Farrer, I would imagine.
I might open and then pass to Peter, because I think the question you raise is a really good one, and we do make efforts to try to make sensible alignment. I will ask Peter to come in on what we do today, but the reason I wanted to come in first is I think there's more that collectively we should be doing across utilities and local government in this area. I think it's an under-realised opportunity to try to get more alignment between forward plans for what we need to do around the water and wastewater services, what our colleagues in the energy sector need to do, what those in telecoms and transport, and of course working with local government. So it's something I think there's more to do on. Been in conversations recently with colleagues in local government about trying to move some of this stuff forward so we have a better alignment to achieve some synergies that I think are currently not fully realised. So I think the question's a really good one. It's one I think we need to take away and carry on trying to do our part in helping to deliver. But Peter, do you want to talk about what we do today?
Yeah, no, it's been a big problem for a long period of time. If you think about it, we've got a £1.1 billion capital investment programme. We have teams of people who are programming the work through contractors, through our own programming teams, and every other utility has exactly the same thing going on. So telecoms, gas, electricity, as well as ourselves, and trying to coordinate things to be done in the same street at the same time is extremely difficult. It's a local authority roads department issue. We work very closely with them, but it's a problem that, quite frankly, has not been cracked yet, being able to hold back on somebody's investment until some other organisation's investment is brought forward. It's very difficult. There are some things that have been done. Some of the more progressive local authorities have done things like that, but it's not consistent across Scotland.
Okay, so you say it's a local authority issue. I think it's an everybody issue, and it may well be that the local authority roads folk are the ones in charge, but often I've found from bitter experience since I've been here, but also as a local councillor, that the lack of cooperation leads to nonsenses. Whereby the local authority resurfaces a road or pavement, and 5 minutes later it's being dug up because a utility has not responded and has come back and later said, we've got vital work to do there, which is quite frankly a waste of money, but also a waste of time for folk in terms of road or pavement closures. How do we get this better, rather than just saying, that's for the local authority to deal with? And how do you save money from all of this, Mr Farrer?
Well, when I said that's for the local authority have the final decision on whether works are permitted or not. That's all I was meaning by that. We do a huge amount of collaboration with the councils at the moment, and I guess the key thing is we all just need to do more. We have got flexibility within our programme. So if we have, for example, 1,000 kilometres of water mains to do, we have the ability to choose when we do these. So through better collaboration and coordination, we could do better. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And I think all we can do is work with the local authority teams that are set up at the moment and just try and improve that.
Okay. In terms of reinstatement, something's dug up, a patch goes on where you've put in new piping or repair piping or whatever it may be. That reinstatement sometimes is not the best, leads to potholes very quickly, which is a problem throughout the country at this moment. How do you get better at that?
Well, I think we are already extremely good at it because it's measured by coring samples every year by the councils, so they monitor performance. We are meeting all the targets that are set out. The Roads Commissioner also has an interest in these things, so I think we're pretty good. And I think the other thing is the councils are all very good at letting us know when things do fail, and we've got a pretty rapid response to getting things fixed once we're notified that something has failed. But the failure rates are very low.
So just wanted to come back to the general point that you started with, is that I think there's more that can be done here, and I agree it's an everyone issue. So I met with COSLA leaders and chief execs a few months back to kind of push for there to be a greater level of alignment between ourselves, other utilities, local authorities. We have really good examples. Simon's again been leading on some of the partnership work we do around Metropolitan Glasgow, here in Edinburgh and the Lothians, in Dundee, where we're seeing the fruits of some of that collaboration really come through. But it's partial, and we could be better as a nation at doing this. And we stand ready to play our part in this, and I hope others will join us, because I think there's unrealised benefits there.
Okay, you picked the wrong cities, but...
and Aberdeen.
Let's go with Aberdeen, because as Mr Farrer is well aware, I've been a bit nippy over the years about various issues. And I'm very pleased that Scottish Water undertook a surface water and wastewater survey in the city of Aberdeen. We know that there is going to have to be a fair amount of capital investment works, particularly in the system around about the harbour area, for example. How do you make sure that the capital spend that you are going to deploy to resolve some of these long-standing issues in some cases is going to be the spend is going to be the best it possibly can be, and how do you align that with other spending and other capital projects that are going on at this moment in time?
Simon, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, so Aberdeen are one of the cities that we work very closely with flooding and surface water management for many years. So we actually, as part of actually work between ourselves, the city and SEPA, have actually developed a master plan that pulls in together our investment, the city's investment, and needs across all of the kind of flooding, not just for now, but actually also looking at future flooding as well. So there's a master plan there. Obviously, the costs of that significantly are greater than the budgets that we hold and the City Council hold as well. So we need to then work out the prioritisation and agree the route for funding schemes that benefit our customers, but also benefit the city as well.
So let me expand in terms of alignment, because I think this is the important thing, and it does get more bangs for the buck. Obviously, Aberdeen City at this moment is embarked on a project to improve Union Street.
Yeah.
Now, you know, I know, that a lot of the works that you are going to have to do are around about Market Street, down to the harbour and beyond. Has there been any thought whatsoever between yourselves and Aberdeen City Council in terms of contracting works together which would benefit all and actually save you all probably a bit of money?
Just before you answer that question, I'm very conscious that committees don't deal with local constituency issues. So drifting wider, Mr Stewart, how in situations across Scotland this will affect, rather than just Aberdeen, because although it's very interesting, it's nowhere near as interesting as Inverness.
This is a strategic issue right across the board, Convener. I'm just using an example in my own patch. Never let it be said that I'm parochial. Mr Farrar, I think, was wanting to come in, were you?
No, I think Simon's...
So first of all, that's the whole idea of having a master plan for the city that allows us to work out what's specifically needed. To broaden it out, I'll talk about the city we're in, here in Edinburgh, and there's a project that I know very well, which is around the Craigleaf part of Edinburgh. Here, historical flooding problems, very similar to Merchants Quarter in Aberdeen, for example. There, we have a shared plan with the city, and actually we are funding the city to deliver the actual projects themselves. They are better placed to deliver those ones, but we make a contribution to that. That's all agreed in advance. So there's an example where we're not as far down the road with Aberdeen in terms of the delivery there. We're still at the master plan level as part of that. Hopefully that will come.
I want to move on a little bit in terms of new development, planning gain, Scottish Water's input or lack of input sometimes in terms of planning applications. I'm very pleased that previously you realigned your teams on the ground to recognise the interest of development, particularly for the government's affordable housing programme. But what can you do better in terms of being in at the very start and saying what is possible and what is not when it comes to very big development applications? Mr Plant, please.
So I'll pick that up. The Development Services team sits within Peter's area, so he may want to comment further. But I think first of all, I'd say that the performance of our Development Services team has been increasing over time. So it's a very strong performance. If you go back some years again, we weren't as good in this area as we are today. So there's been a real investment in getting it better, and thank you for the recognition of some of that work. We review about 4,000 planning applications each year, and I'll come to the broader point you're making in a minute, but it does mean we are supporting large numbers of connections across Scotland, and we are seeing both some population growth in Scotland and also a shift in population largely from west to east, so very significant growth in parts of the country. And there are challenges, all of that, but actually I'm really proud that we're delivering really great outcomes, including in new developments like Winchborough, not far from here, where we've put in a brand new wastewater treatment works, which is state-of-the-art, way lower carbon, way lower cost, and allows that particular community to almost quadruple in size. And if I come nearer to the Aberdeen area, the investment we made in Invercarney is actually supporting significant changes in the way that raw water quality is happening in that part of the world, but also supporting ongoing growth across Deeside. However, the point, I think, that again, this is where there is more to do, is ensuring we're playing our full role in working at the strategic planning level. So when you're looking ahead at what growth and change is going to happen in any given geography, how do we make sure that the water and wastewater issues that are present in any given geography are fully reflected in the forward plan? That's something I think we do, but I think we can do more of to really try to help any part of the country reach the best choices in relation to the future development of that geography.
And getting that right would ensure that you get more bangs for your buck in terms of that £1.1 billion of capital investment, would it not?
It would. It would be it would better allow us to tailor our investment to meet the needs of the communities at the lowest cost. And I think it would also help ensure that the development plans that emerge are, again, making the most of the opportunities that are there. I don't know, Peter, do you want to add anything? Because I say this sits within your area.
The only thing to add is that I have a strategic planning team who liaise with all of the City Council planners. They're on first-name terms with them. It's through relationships like that that allowed us to make sure that we built the new treatment works at Winchborough in advance of the 3,800 new houses that are being built there. So if there is anything that you're hearing that you think could be better, please just let me know, and we will come out and we'll speak to people about it.
So being entirely non-parochial, I'm glad to hear that you're in touch with the planners in the city.
Yeah.
But I think the same goes for elsewhere. I know, Mr Farrer, that you're very well aware of the difficulties that there were in Steny Hill in Shetland, which I think have now been resolved. But I think those cooperations need to be much more than just with city planners. Would you agree?
Absolutely, yep.
Okay, thank you, Convener.
Thank you. A brief, very brief question from the Deputy Convener. Michael.
Yeah, can I just pick up on the £1.1 billion of capital investment in 2024-2025? What is the gap between your level of investment, capital investment this year, against your assessed level of capital investment for 24-25?
Close. I mean, that was what sort of the number that Simon was referring to earlier. I can't remember precisely. It's about 99%, is it?
We're £25 million higher than our original forecast.
Right. So your assessed level of capital investment needed for this financial year was around £1.1 billion.
So it's probably the word needed is the one. We have a profile of investment that's generally increasing by £60 or £70 million a year going forward over this period in terms of increasing on that. So we set out where our expectation was, and our original forecast that we'd invest about £1.1 billion. I think we're just 1.125, I think, at the end of the year. So we're just slightly higher. Demand is significantly higher than that, though. So we know, for example, our demand for maintaining and replacing our assets, we know we're investing at a rate significantly lower than what's needed there. Hence, the challenges we'll face in the future.
OK, well, let me reframe the question then. What is the gap between what is your capital investment this year against that of demand?
So the demand, if you look about our future demand, so we're doing work planning for our next regulatory period in terms of our future demand.
No, I'm asking about 24-25.
Yeah, so I think in terms of 24-25, we'd originally taken out 500 million over the period, which was our original estimation of what our demand was. Over there. So if you take that over the period, that's £100 million per year in reality, less than that we'd planned to invest over this period.
So just so I understand you correctly here, that you said £500 million. Is that over the 6-year regulatory period?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So on average, it's around 90, £100 million a year, short of where you think where capital demand is.
So the demand for capital, so our future demands in terms of whether it be for growth, for water quality, for flooding.
I understand it can be all I'm trying to understand is what's the gap between demand for capital expenditure and what you're spending?
Okay. So.
And I think you've answered it. It's £500 million over the 6-year regulatory period. Is that correct?
Sort of. Can I just come Because I think what Simon's trying to convey is that, yes, there was a regulatory period kind of final determination which set the amount of money we were allowed to spend for that period. That's an approximation of what the demand is. It's not the demand. It's always less than the demand because even with that increase in investment compared to the previous period that was allowed in the strategic review in 2021, it was some way short of actually getting to the proper replacement rate for our assets. We were around about 40% of where we should be. This settlement that we're in at the moment is improving it, but it doesn't catch up. And some of what we're seeing like live today is that particularly on repairs, we're running hot. So there's a bigger, our assets are failing as we'd expect them to because they're at the end of their lives and the conditions, the weather conditions that they are now coping with are more severe. So we're seeing some of that, meaning we are not keeping pace with demand. And I think that's what Simon was trying to convey. Okay. So it's a complex picture, Deputy Convener, sorry, but hopefully that's a bit clearer.
Yeah, sort of. Thanks.
Sort of. I did my best.
So much for the short question. Mark, next one's with you.
Can I turn to net zero then? I mean, you're, I think, about halfway there towards net zero. You've got 10 years to get to net zero. Can you say a little bit more about what the kind of key challenges are for that next 10 years?
I'll ask Simon to come in. We are on track, which is the good news, high level, but Simon.
Yeah, so just to remind the committee, so net zero for us is a mixture of our operational activities. So you imagine we're a big electricity user, a big fleet, for example, our operational activities, but also our investment activities. So every £1 million that we invest in that 1.1 billion generates carbon at the top of it. So we've set the ambition to get to net zero by 2040, so 5 years ahead of the Scottish Government's ambition at the time. We're making great progress actually across a whole range of areas. So this year we'll have reduced our carbon footprint, our operational carbon footprint by about 10,000 tonnes of CO2 through a mixture of renewable energy, energy efficiency, new fleet, and also peatland restoration and woodland creation. Have record years for both of those. So making great progress on that, and we should, if things go well, we should be hitting operational net zero sometime during the mid of the 2030s. Very dependent on the greening of the grid as part of that. So that will be ahead of the time. And that's because we always knew the biggest challenge was around investment. So for every, for every £1 million we invest, we generate about 100 tonnes of CO2 on average across our programme. So we're investing in low-carbon concrete, low-carbon steel, alternates to plastics as part of that on that one. And it'll always need to be balanced out, and it'll get balanced out in the end with carbon capture on our own estates, peatland restoration and woodland creation. And Alex mentioned earlier the work we're doing at Catrin, for example. So Catrin, once it's completed, will be Scotland's newest, biggest new forest for, I think, about 100 years. Once it's created, 4,500 hectares of new woodland there, working with Forestry and Land Scotland to do that, which is going to be fantastic for, obviously, capturing carbon, fantastic for biodiversity and for well-being, etc., for people who use the area.
So would you say then your approach is effectively about insetting? Because you have land assets, you can obviously invest in those to capture carbon, Loch Catrin being a critical one, but it's quite sticky to really reduce the emissions from the industrial side of it.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering where you hit the balance, because you could go really hard on investing in the industrial process to squeeze every single last gram of carbon out of that, or you could lean more into insetting and using your other assets. So where do you operationally strike the balance? Because I guess everybody's going to start relying on Scotland's land more and more to lock up carbon, and there's only going to be a certain amount of it available to those who are not fortunate enough to have a catchment like Loch Atron or whatever within their asset base. So,
yeah. So it's as you said, it's a mixture. And we think there are. We think we can get to 75% reduction in our our investment emissions, which would put us well ahead of any other organisation around there. And then on our operational side, we have two specific emissions, which are what are called process emissions. These are nitrogen dioxide, N2O, and methane that are released as part of a natural breakdown of wastewater. So at the moment, there is no technology. There's some approaches we're testing, but that part of it we know at the moment there's not a technology solution for, so we need to offset that. So that's the basis of how we basically at the minute is really ambitious investment emissions and a realistic reduction in these process emissions. Okay. But also recognising there's multiple benefits from the carbon capture side. By doing the woodland, the peatland creation, actually multiple benefits, water quality, flooding reduction, all of these as well.
Yeah, and I think the Great Trossachs Forest extending all the way to Loch Lomond and then up to Tyndrum will be quite incredible. So I think the last question I was going to ask you about was just around the climate change plan then, and is there anything in the forthcoming climate change plan that you would like to see?
So first of all, last year we published our climate change adaptation plan as part of it, which is very much aligned with Committee for Climate Change, for example's own experience. So that set out really our challenges, which are about too much water, too little water, and also wider impact in terms of supply chain, multiple impacts across global, because we rely on a global supply chain. So they're our areas. So areas that can actually deal with, as Mr. Stewart was talking about earlier, flooding. How do we adapt our cities better for flooding? How do we reduce water usage? So how do we develop new housing that actually has lower water usage than it does today? If we can think about how we push those two areas on, I think are the areas that we would support.
Okay, so you're seeing more of a focus then, contribution from Scottish Water in terms of adaptation rather than pure kind of mitigation.
Yeah. So adaptation, mitigation, we're really well underway with our mitigation activities and a great the harder part is adaptation. How do we adapt cities? How do we adapt housing across Scotland, for example, to reduce, to make our services more resilient to future challenges? And these challenges are already on them. We already have had wettish years, driest years over the last 4 or 5 years. So these challenges are already with us. But we need, as we've talked about earlier, we need partnerships to do that. We need to work very closely with local authorities. We need to work very closely with SEPA and other organisations, the national parks, for example, to allow us to adapt Scotland and therefore adapt our services.
That is at the heart of the long-term strategy work that Deirdre mentioned at the very beginning, Mark, that's where we're setting those sorts of ambitions. We can't do this on our own. There's going to have to be more of a everybody issue, to pick up Mr. Stewart's point from earlier.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the Deputy Convener's got some questions. I would just say I'm delighted to hear you're reducing the use of plastics across your business. It's a pity you wrap all your vans in plastic when you get them and then discard it at the end, but maybe there's a good reason for that. Michael.
Thank you. You mentioned there about your operational carbon footprint. You're making good progress and you expect by the mid-2030s to be net zero. From my understanding of what Peter said earlier on, quite a large part of your operational work is undertaken by subcontractors, it's outsourced. How do you ensure that they are also working towards achieving net zero? And do you use your procurement process to drive bidders, contractors, to ensure that they're reducing their carbon footprint in how they operate? Not the materials that they necessarily use. I hear you about things like using low carbon concrete, etc., but how they as a business operate in reducing their carbon footprint.
So the short answer is yes, but Simon, you might want to give a bit more detail.
Yeah, and I'd actually like to celebrate the work that some of our supply chain doing have really taking on the ambition around net zero. We see a lot of it here in Scotland, organisations really taking that on in terms of thinking about how they can become net zero, driven by the fact that it really is an expectation of us for them. So as part of our procurement exercises, net zero is a core part to it in terms of how can they contribute to us getting those investment emissions down by 75%. It's part of all of our procurement exercises. And we're in the middle of our procurement for some of our big alliances at the moment. And it's, again, a really core part, an expectation on them to reduce their contribution, their own activities. We measure it on a project-by-project basis now. We've got the knowledge and the information that allows us to measure it on a project-by-project basis, as well as on, as we procure new steel, for example, or new materials.
The great thing is, of course, that you save carbon, you save costs, so there's an alignment with trying to do the right thing to meet our net zero objectives, and actually it also drives better value.
Okay. Well, some of that's debatable, but that's not...
In the round, we can have a longer conversation, but in the round...
I won't go down that particular rabbit hole just now. So.
Yeah. More rabbit holes. Mark, I think you had a question you wanted to ask before I come back to the Deputy Convener on a series of questions he wanted on water quality.
Yeah, it was just a further question then around objectives about EU alignment, particularly with the Drinking Water Directive and the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. Kind of what your views are on that. I mean, I obviously recognise that there can be, say, a tension between objectives within these directives and how they land. So anyway, I'm interested in what your views are on that. Are there any particular stances that you're encouraging the Scottish Government to take?
So we recognise the principle of dynamic alignment with the EU, which is Scottish Government policy, and then we respond to what comes to us from the Government and from our regulators, and then we act accordingly. There are some significant changes, for example, on the drinking water side that we've been dealing with under Simon's leadership, around looking at chlorates and haloacetic acids, which are new metrics that we're taking forward. It's not our decision as to whether that comes to us or not. It comes from the process I described. We then seek to respond rapidly to it. So I know, Simon, you want to talk about that bit, or others? Yeah,
so obviously the revised Drinking Water Directive came in 2 or 3 years ago, which brought new contaminants, new parameters for us to measure and to remove. So our role, as much as anything else, is to make sure that the Scottish Government are informed about the likely costs and impact of those. And probably our main ask is time, because some of these things are relatively new for us to do, and it's about having time to actually react and to find solutions to removing things like haloacetic acids or PFAS or these type of new parameters for us.
Okay, so the overall objectives, though, of the directives and the policies that arise from them, you don't have a concern about the direction of travel limits. It's just more about time for implementation. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. So if you take the new revised Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, which has been brought into the EU, in terms of 2035, I think is due to go live as part of that. We will support the Scottish Government in terms of looking at the costs and implications of bringing that in. Overall, that's about circular economy approaches. It's about getting value from wastewater. They're positive things, I think, for society if we move in that direction. The key, though, is our jobs to support the decision elsewhere. I don't think we should be necessarily saying whether or not things are yeses or nos.
Right, but I mean, you did recently influence the environmental authorisations regulation that came to this committee actually last week, in relation to spreading of sewage sludge and cadmium levels. So I'm just interested, because if you are a public corporation, so you have a role in terms of working with the objectives of government, taking those ministerial objectives, working with it. But there is also feedback there as well. So I'm interested if there's areas where you feel that government needs to hold back or change deadlines or whatever, because you seem to be saying that, well, actually, it's just up for us to accept the view of government and implement it. But that's a clear area where you did make a call for a change in that, and as a result, government did change the regulations in relation to sludge disposal.
I mean, that's a very good example. There's an example about where in the Western Isles, for example, because of the natural cadmium levels in the soil, there, that would have impacted on one of our procedures, which was about land application of bioresources there. So we set out actually the impact of that and our response to, I think, to this committee in terms of set out our response to that, and then obviously that very pleased that that information's been taken on and the regulations amended in that way. We will, for example, if you imagine some of the revised Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive rules, if there are certain things in there that today we can't measure, so there'll be microplastics or PFAS in wastewater sludge, for example. There aren't currently methods that allow us to do that. I think what we'll suggest is that we need to be able to measure these things and get a better understanding of the level of risk that Scotland faces before, before the Scottish Government or others decide on a final level.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark. Now, back to Michael with quite a detailed line of questioning, I think, but just reminding you, we're running short of time, so short answers to Michael's very short questions would be much appreciated. That's a tip to both of you, by the way.
So when you last appeared before this committee as an organisation in October 2023, you disputed allegations that had been made in the media that Scottish Water was discharging CSOs during periods of dry weather. Since then, we've had the report from Environmental Standards Scotland, which was published in September 2024. Do you still dispute those allegations?
So I think this is an area where we've spent a lot of time investing. As you know, we've mentioned earlier, we have more information available to us as a result of the monitoring that's now in place. But I'll ask Simon to pick up the specific questions. We work very closely with SEPA and ESS on this issue, as you would imagine.
Yeah, just a reminder, I'll try and keep it quick as quickly as possible. So across Scotland, we've got 4,500 what are called combined sewer overflows, which are in the networks to actually protect houses, businesses when significant rainfall lands in our catchments and drains into our sewers, and the capacity of the sewers just can't deal with the rainfall at certain times. So every year we provide what's called a flow return to SEPA for a certain number of those overflows, which have got licences that require us to report on those. Actually, that flow return was published yesterday for last year as part of that. And that will tell you the number of overflows from a limited number out there that have operated, whether or not they're for a duration, and whether or not they've the volumes overflowed as part of it. So it was a very set of data. Deirdre mentioned earlier that we, as part of our improvement urban water route map, we made a commitment to put 1,000 new monitors in by the end of December. That was achieved. We're actually about 1,400 monitors now actually installed. And as part of that, we also published a website. Anybody can look, any customer or community across Scotland can look at the website that tells you whether or not today or any other day, out of those, about 1,100 or so on the website at the moment, that are active, whether or not they're operating as part of that. Now, we've looked in detail as part of that. If you take those monitors on our overflow map, how many of those are actually operating and how many of those are then operating on a dry day. And the challenge should be is if they're operating on a dry day, that is when they shouldn't be operating as part of that. So in February, just to give you some idea, we had about 4,000 or so overflow operations over that month. So that was in terms of over the month. About 198 of those were not expected. So we investigate those, and out of those, less than 1% of that original number are actually operating under a dry day activity. We think there were 9 in February, just to give an idea from that 4,000 or so. 9 of those were actually operating in a dry day. Now, that doesn't mean that they're polluting. So I think the key part here is an overflow is due to operate. The question is it polluting? And in February, I think we had 3 pollution incidents out of all of those operations. So there will be some as we get better information, there's no doubt there will be some of those overflows we will learn are operating when they shouldn't operate. And as part of that, we will then investigate it. We'll find out if there's an operational solution to that. And if not, then we will agree with SEPA whether or not there needs to be a capital project, an actual project to solve that problem.
OK, so that feels to me that in October 2023, when you disputed the allegations, in fact, you didn't know whether that was accurate or not. And let me give you an example. ESS, in their analysis, gave an example of a pumping station in Dunoon, where it spilled 207 times in 2023 for a total duration of 187 days over 277 individual days. 31 of these spills occurred during days when it was classed as dry. That was in 2023. But when it was put to you in 2023 at this committee, you disputed the allegations. So the reality is that you didn't actually know exactly what was going on at that particular point.
So let me. So first of all, I think we welcome obviously the ESS's report, and you'll be aware that we've responded to that along with SEPA and the Scottish Government as well. So we have responded to those questions. So I think the key part here is whether or not those are causing pollution. So whether or not, in terms of whether or not those incidents are actually causing pollution. So first of all, we publish the data, so the data you've got is obviously from our own published there. So nobody's, we've been quite transparent about the data that we actually have. The key part for all of these, though, is if they are operating, and they're operating when we're expecting them to operate. If they're not operating when they shouldn't be operating, we now investigate, and we will report that if it's a pollution incident, it will get reported to SEPA.
Yep. My question wasn't about whether it was polluting or not. The issue was about whether there was CSOs being discharged during dry periods. Is the reality that as an organisation, when you disputed the allegations, in fact, you did not know?
Yeah, can I just come in at that? I mean, clearly, I was at that meeting, and I don't know the context in which it was relayed, and I'll need to have a look back over the notes just to get the exact context. But I don't think any of us would have been saying that there was never any dry spills, because, as I said, I've been 40 years in this organisation, and any time a blockage occurs in a sewer, it can lead to an overflow, which is a dry spill on a dry day. This happens all the time. The problem is, or the solution to that, is that my team go out there and we fix these blockages as quickly as we can so that they don't cause any pollution incidents. And we do 38,000 blockages a year. So it's just the context of it. I certainly would not say that we never have a dry spill, because we have dry spills any time there is a blockage from anything that goes down a sewer. So I just wanted to make that clear.
OK. ESS assessment is that you've probably underestimated the amount of dry spills that are taking place. Is that an accurate reflection of what your understanding of is of the situation now?
So I think, first of all, from those 4,500 combined sewer overflows we have across Scotland, not all of those are monitored. So first of all, we're by the end of this year, should be about 45% of those will actually be monitored. And they're the ones that we believe operate or have operated in the past, and the ones which we've previously agreed with SEPA lead to, for example, sewer-related debris, wet wipes, for example, getting out into the environment. So I think the key one in here is, as Peter said, the vast majority of anything coming out of the sewer network is caused by blockages, which is caused by wet wipes and other material putting down the sewer. That's the biggest cause as part of that. We will have dry day spills, and the information that we're now collecting from our new monitors, from the use of our Intelligent Control Centre, will tell us that, and we will then go out, investigate, and where possible, remedy the issue.
So, is the assessment made by ESS that you've underestimated this correct?
So, in terms
if it
of
makes it easier, you can answer it yes or no.
So the answer is, in that case, then, Deputy Convener, is a yes, because until we have all of the information available to us, our estimation is based on our kind of forecast out there. So the answer, in case of until we have the full set of information, the answer will be yes.
Okay. Now, of course, increased monitoring will give you greater accuracy of data to address these issues, which brings me on to my next point. And my next point is, when can we expect a plan from Scottish Water on addressing this particular problem?
So we've already published the plan. So we published our what's called Improving Urban Water Route Map back in 2021. That set out commitments around improving our monitoring. It also set out a plan for improving those combined sewer overflows we know today are having an impact. And there's about 900 or so across Scotland, of which 20 of those have an impact in terms of water quality. So we already know a huge amount of information there. So as part of that, we've already set out a multi-year kind of plan for what we'll do to address those, working with SEPA and the Scottish Government.
So can I just clarify, is that a clear plan about when storm overflows won't spill during dry periods?
So as part of that, we've set out that once we've got the information in terms of the monitoring, if we find that a combined sewer overflow is spilling during dry day, first of all, we'll investigate that, because there have been many reasons for why that's happening. Blockages being most, as we know today, the most significant part of that. So we will investigate as part of that. We'll put in, where we can, an operational fix to allow that to be remedied. If that's not a fix, a solution at the time, then we will agree with SEPA the investment we need to remedy the issue in the future.
So when ESS said to the committee that they would like to see a clear plan from Scottish Water on when storm overflows would to address spilling during dry weather, have ESS just missed this plan, or have they misunderstood your plan?
So first of all, ESS are very aware of the Improving Urban Water Route Map. I think they mentioned it actually in their report as part of that. And that's our commitment to improve our monitoring, improve those combined sewer overflows we already know have got issues, and also our response when we get more information.
I'm not entirely sure that adds up to the plan I'm actually asking for, but I suspect your problem in developing that plan is that you don't have enough data in order to inform it.
You've got Alex sitting very patiently waiting to come in.
Just to come in, Simon set out, we put the 500 million Improving Waters plan out there. ESS are aware of it. As the more granular information comes in, of course, you can then translate that into operationalising the general themes that sit within the Improving Urban Waters plan. But I want to come back to this point. Right? What we're trying to do is to use finite money to deliver the best possible environmental outcomes. We start from a position where we have 87% of our water bodies in good or better condition for water quality. That's a great starting point. We all want that to be even better. You want it to be 100, right? Of course we do. Acting on our own, we can nudge that to about 88.5%. We need others to come to the party too, common refrain during the course of this morning's hearing. But critically, if we went for blanket monitoring everywhere, that would be a really bad use of money, because you're trying to use the money available to target the areas where there is a risk of environmental harm and then intervene accordingly. And the plan, I think, that you're after, Deputy Convener, emerges as we get more of that information. We work out where we're actually deploying the resources available to us. But it is really important to keep hold of that principle of trying to maximise finite money for best environmental outcomes.
I understand that and I appreciate that challenge.
Yeah.
It would be reasonable, though, to expect over the course of the coming years for you as an organisation to have a clear understanding of what you think the time frame would be in order to end this type of issue.
Agreed.
So do you...
Yeah.
Well, if we agree on that point, then what is the time frame?
So, we'll be doing stuff now, which was Simon was talking about, in line with the Improving Urban Waters route map, and then crystallising the particular interventions that become apparent as needed through the greater information we have. And then, as we form our business plan for the 27-2033 period, what's left would be something we'd be targeting as our part of the work that needs to happen in the next 6 years as part of that regulatory settlement.
So you expect it to be ended within the next regulatory period?
I don't know at this stage, because some of these issues are really complex. And again, as it's really important to remember, a CSO operating when it should is not a problem. I know that's not what you're asking about. You're asking about when it is a problem. I want us to get better and better at making sure that when there's an issue there, we can intervene before it becomes a problem environmentally. That's part of why we're putting monitors on our sewers, our intelligent wastewater network. It's the work that Peter talks about around trying to reduce blockages. If we could get some parliamentary change so that we had a ban on wet wipes containing plastic, that would help massively. So that would be really good if that could happen. It has to happen at Westminster first, but I hope that there's continued support from this committee to get that ban in place, because it would make a huge difference to blockages. 80% of those blockages are caused by wet wipes containing plastic.
Okay, thanks.
Now, there are other committee members that want to ask questions. I'm just going to say this because we are out of time. So you can each have 2 questions, literally 2 questions, and they've got to be quick fire, because I want one at the end. Now, well, I've been very quiet all the way through, if the truth be known. So Monica first, followed by Douglas, followed by Mark.
I always worry when the convener is quiet, but thank you. So just following on from the Deputy Convener's questions about the evidence you gave us in October 2023 about CSOs and dry spells and pollution impact. At that time, Alex, when I put questions to you, you said that media coverage around this was misleading. You know, there was a number of inaccuracies. And I asked you at that time whether Scottish Water was planning to take any legal action in that regard, because obviously it's very serious if people are making wrong allegations about Scottish Water. You told the committee we are not planning to take legal action at this stage. Can you give an update on that? Did you take any legal action?
No, we haven't taken legal action.
Okay, and what's the reason for that?
I think it's better to actually try to inform rather than take legal cases.
Okay, and do you have legal advice to that effect?
I don't think we took legal advice on the matter. It was just a decision that we considered it was better to try to actually just explain the information.
Okay, it's good to get an update. Thank you, Convener.
I can count, just in case you thought I couldn't. Douglas.
Convener, looking online just now, there's 3 areas that have been in overflow for 48 hours, Dunoon, Largs and Aberdour. Would that be causing pollution at this time? Or, I think, Simon, you were seem to suggest that doesn't, just because it's been an overflow situation for the last 40 hours doesn't mean it's causing pollution. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So the vast majority of overflows, as the ones you're looking at there, will be operating because of heavy rain or rainfall over the last period of time, and it can also take multiple days for that to flow through. So, yeah, very, very few of those overflows lead to pollution.
So if I look at the Aberdour one, it's been in a state like that for about a week now. I don't think it's been heavy rain in that time, but
yeah. So I can. So if maybe I can just explain what happens once one of those goes off. So if one of those overflows is operating over time, so first of all that raises an alert in our Intelligent Control Centre. They will investigate. So it may be due to the monitor itself. So the monitors, in terms of whether or not there's an issue with the monitor itself, if it is operating and it's rainfall, then they'll monitor it. If it's operating when there's no rainfall, then go and send a team out. So we've got a team of people who go out and investigate to try and understand why specifically that's operating at this time.
So is there a way that the public can see whether that's actually causing pollution at this time or not?
So there's no link at the moment in terms of the specifics on the overflow map with pollution. SEPA, as part of their role, do in essence the water quality monitoring. They monitor the water quality. They will look whether or not there's any impact on the water environment. And as Alex mentioned, today Scotland's water environment is its best ever level. But we would investigate each of these.
Okay, thanks, Camilla.
As well, Mark. Right, let's try you. See if you can do two for me.
So we've got.
Okay.
So there we go. So it's like a parlour game, isn't it? So we've got a number of bathing water quality areas in Scotland that are not safe, to be quite honest. And Kinghorn Harbour, I think, is one of those. And that's despite, substantial investment from Scottish Water, a very long process with SEPA. I'm interested in your thoughts on whether CSOs are the primary issue in those situations, or if there are other wider issues to do with diffuse pollution, agriculture, etc., which are not in your remit, but nevertheless, we're not going to be able to tackle these problems without changes in land management further upstream.
It's a really complicated issue around Kinghorn, as you know. I mean, Simon, you've been involved with SEPA over many years looking at this issue. It's a complex one. Do you want to just quickly summarise where we are?
Yeah, so Kinghorn, we obviously worked with SEPA for many years to try and understand what the causes of pollution were at Kinghorn, which has impacted on its bathing water status. And it's actually around spikes in pollutants, so occasional spikes, which are obviously more difficult to do. So we've removed the combined sewer overflow, so there is no combined sewer overflow impact in there. One of the thoughts at the moment is actually maybe coming through groundwater ingress into the sewerage system. So we'll work closely with SEPA to investigate and also look to remedy if it's an impact on our assets, or even support them if it's an impact on others into the harbour.
So when are you going to fix it?
So I'm not sure at the moment that it actually. So first of all, we don't necessarily understand what the cause of that pollutant is in the harbour. As you'll be aware, we appealed the enforcement notice. So SEPA put an enforcement notice on us for Kinghorn Harbour. So we appealed that and successfully appealed that because of the nature of what it was asking us to do. We were unclear in terms of what we were actually asked to do. But we are committed to working with SEPA to support them to understand the issues, and actually if there's an impact from our assets causing that pollution, we'll obviously work with SEPA to agree a set of improvement works.
Okay.
Mark, congratulations. The prize is yours. Okay. I think we've gone through all the questions. I've just got a simple one at the end. Alex, before you started working for Scottish Water in 2022, I did a FOI on the water mains across Scotland, and I think at that stage, and I'm going to round the figures up if you'll excuse me, there were about 50,000 kilometres of water mains around Scotland, and you, or Scottish Water, estimated at that stage that about 12% of them were manufactured using asbestos, and that meant that there was about 6,000 kilometres of asbestos small diameter pipes, and that you were allowing £40 million a year to replace those pipes, which meant that we would eventually be rid of asbestos in our water pipes by 2072. Are you still investing at that rate, or are you speeding it up? And should the public expect you to be speeding it up?
So I'll ask Simon to come in. And asbestos cement mains are one of our mains that are problematic for all sorts of reasons, because they're coming towards the end of their life and the failure rates are increasing. So some of the repair numbers I talked about do link to the fact that we have asbestos cement mains in our system. There's no risk to public health. Let's be really clear about that issue. But Simon, do you want to pick up where we are on the replacement plans?
Yeah, so as part of our next SR27 business plan, we're looking to significantly increase the replacement rate of the asbestos cement mains, and that's because they are coming, they're coming to end of life, and what that means for a customer is increased bursts or increased interruptions to their actual supply. Now, this is a UK-wide issue. Mr Dorris mentioned Welsh Water, for example, very similar soils to ourselves and very similar rural communities to ourselves. They're following exactly the same challenge as well. So yes, we're putting forward a proposal to accelerate the rate of asbestos cement mains replacement.
Okay, so I accept that while the pipe is wet, there is no risk to public health from asbestos. But the very fact that you've suggested that the pipes are failing means that there will be a drying, a fracturing and splintering of the asbestos, which could cause greater risk. And you had gone through Scottish Water a phase of replacing these pipes by bursting them into the soil, by threading a pipe through them, which was found to be unhelpful and polluting in its own right. So I understand what you've said to me. I am concerned. 2072 for the last one to go. Are we going to get before that?
So we're putting forward a proposal in terms of accelerating the replacement rate, which will, I think, 15, 20 years is our view depending on the rate of replacement. Obviously, there's still quite a lot left to go. It'd be 15, 20 years before we would have replaced that stock of pipes.
Okay, the good news is I won't be around to ask you questions at that stage. But would you not think that Scotland would expect you to be replacing them faster? I mean, I have to say I've worked with it and I understand it, and it gives me grave concern if the pipes are fracturing and coming to the end of your life, because that's the time they become the most dangerous, in my opinion. If a pipe fractures, it dries, bits drop off, and it's very difficult for you to clear it out of the system. So I'm just asking you to reflect on that and maybe say a little bit to the public about why you want it to come forward, because I think 15 years forward is not enough, in my opinion. 2050, that is. Should it not be 2030?
So it's a balance, Convener. It's a balance between... So those pipes, some of those are operating very well at the moment. They're not in the conditions that you're saying. There are obviously some that are bursting more regularly. So ours is trying to, how do we maintain the burst rates and no worse conditions for the customers, and then replace the stock of pipes at the same time. 5,500 kilometres of pipes to replace. That's a significant investment required and a significant workforce to do that. So it's about balance.
I think my concern would be if there was a pipe that had burst, it would indicate that whole pipe was actually probably dubious, and you need to replace large sections just rather than repairing small bursts.
Correct.
That's right.
That's correct.
That's how we prioritise.
Okay. Thank you. I don't think there's any other questions. So slightly longer than normal. Thank you very much for giving evidence this morning. There are a few things that you've offered to follow up on, and there's a few things that we'll ask you to follow up on. And what I would say is I'm going to suspend the meeting literally for 5 minutes, committee, before we deal with our final session. So I suspend the meeting. Okay, welcome back to the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee. The third item of business is consideration of a petition PE 2123 submitted by the Asthma and Lung UK Scotland. The petition asks the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to amend the Air Quality Standards Scotland Regulations 2010 by setting new limits for nitrogen dioxide and fine particulate matter in order to align with the World Health Organisation's 2021 air quality guidelines. We are dealing with this petition for the first time, although we did conduct wider work on air quality this session, including the issue of alignment with the 2021 guidelines. We also touched on the issue in recent evidence sessions with SEPA and ESS Scotland. Draw your attention to the meeting papers and paper 3 specifically, which sets out some of the options for further scrutiny. And we also, as well, have the option of closing the petition if we consider that appropriate. Does any member have any views they wish to express? Mark, you do.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I think we should hold an evidence session. We should invite in the petitioners and other relevant stakeholders. And I think in addition to that, we should write to government and stakeholders and get views, written views as well.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Does anyone else have any views? Monica.
Just to agree with Mark Ruskell on that, I think it's important that we get further evidence on this, and I think there's a whole range of stakeholders who are relevant.
Okay, anyone else have any views? Michael.
Yeah, just for transparency, I'm a charity ambassador for the Asthma and Allergy Foundation, who are not directly involved in the petition, but who obviously have an interest in it. My view is that I think the first step I think we should take is write to the Scottish Government to get an updated position from them, and then to make an informed decision about what our next steps are off the back of that, including the potential for having a round table. But I'd like to get the update first of all. Okay,
Bob, did you want to come in?
It was just before making an informed view on this, would the Deputy Convener's suggestion wouldn't preclude an oral evidence session at a later date, depending on what the reply was from the Scottish Government?
I think what the suggestion that Deputy Convener was making was, first of all, find out what the government are doing, and then consider the best way to respond to that, and respond to Mark's suggestions and Monica's suggestions about having an evidence session. But it's slightly dependent, all of this, on our work programme discussion, which comes later in this. So, unless anyone... Douglas, you're looking at me as if you want to say something.
No, I was just going to agree with the Deputy Convener. I think it'd be good to hear what the government's doing before we go to the next step, so fully supportive of that view.
So can I suggest that in this stage that we do write to the Scottish Government, ask what action they're taking to align the standards together, and then based on the evidence that we received on that, we consider the option of holding a round table or an evidence session to work out how best to proceed with that. Are we all agreed?
Yeah.
We are agreed. Thank you. The clerks will make sure the petitioners know what we're doing, and we'll send the appropriate letter to the Scottish Government. And that is all that we are doing in private. We're going to, in public. We're going to move into private session. Thank you.